All right, welcome to Debatable. I'm Domonique Foxworth. That's David Dennis Jr. And we stayed up. Well, not as long as we had to because the Warriors ended it early for us. Thanks, Golden State. You happy, David? You feel better?
Well,
You
are
Steph
you happy
Curry
because
sycophant?
if the Warriors were going down 0-2, I would have not shown up and you'd have to carry this thing by yourself. So I'm glad
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thank you,
glad
Steph,
we're doing
for
the show together tonight.
making my night earlier and my job easier. Speaking of making my job easier, Alabaster?
Okay, guys.
Yeah, I'm in a good
So
mood tonight.
you really are.
Mhm.
It's a better place when the Warriors win, I think.
No, it's not.
Yeah. Everyone's in a better mood except for me. But I have to ask this question. I'm forced to. After 2 games, does it just feel like the Warriors are the better team in this series?
Absolutely. I mean, yeah. And LeBron wasted a vintage LeBron half. Like, we're going to need that half at some point, King James. And you wasted it in a game that we all kind of knew you were going to lose. Like, it's not likely that you're going to get the sweep away from home like the Kings did it, but they were home. And yeah, the Warriors, even in the game that they lost, they were trailing by, what was it, 15 points with like 5 minutes left, and they closed the gap in no time with that lineup of death with Draymond. And then we saw for much of this game, they had Draymond at the 5, and who knew that the answer to AD was little old Draymond being annoying and feisty. So yeah, it does feel like they just got more weapons, more options offensively and defensively. So it does feel like, and maybe I'm just overreacting as is the tradition in the NBA playoffs, overreact after every single game. But it didn't even feel like the Lakers were that much better after game one.
Yeah, it seemed like the Lakers, game one was about the Lakers having rest and the Warriors being tired, and the Warriors just trying to, it felt like a game where Steve Kerr was just trying to steal one, even though they were at home. And now the Warriors are settled into their game plan. We've seen them do this so many times where they'll lose a game, but in the fourth quarter, they stumble onto something that feels sustainable. And that's what happened in game one. They stumbled on the small lineup that kept AD a little bit out the paint, that made people run around, and then they stuck with the rest of the game. And Steve Kerr, the maniacal genius, starting JaMychal Green, and really caused problems. He was wide open, for most of his threes, and he was nailing them. And I don't think Draymond is the answer to AD. I think AD doing this thing where he looks unstoppable and then disappearing 48 hours later is the answer to AD, because nobody thought this dude was going to come back and score 40 again, which is an indictment of a lot of the stuff that he does most of his career.
Yeah. So I mean, Looney was 6 supposedly. Maybe he was. Maybe he wasn't. Maybe this was a mastermind way to save face for Looney and use a smaller lineup that had more shooting to challenge AD. Either way, it doesn't matter. I don't know. Like, I get your point. You're right. AD from game to game is just not a consistently dominant force, but I feel like that's discrediting what Draymond Green. I feel like Draymond Green is the definition of it doesn't show up in the box score. Like, it was so many things, so many tip balls, so many rebounds that he didn't get, but he made possible for other people to get. So many like wild, wide base, high post positions that he forced AD into just because he's Draymond Green and he's that type of guy. That those type of things never show up in the stat sheet. He made AD uncomfortable, and you're not going to be able to quantify that necessarily. Draymond, I'm sure, hopes that somebody is going to quantify it as his contract comes close to expiration. But he certainly is showing his value. Much like last year, it seemed like that team was struggling in the finals until Draymond showed up, and he is the key to this. And I don't condone punching people in the face, but if somebody got a lot of money that you thought you deserved, maybe you might want to punch him in the face too.
But yeah, at the same time though, if you're Anthony Davis and you're supposed to be the best player, give me the ball at the elbow and I'm going to score on the best defender, best defensive player in the world. I'm just going to do it. And I don't care how uncomfortable or whatever. On the other side, you have a player in Stephen Curry who's getting trailed around the court, and they're making his life incredibly difficult. and he's finding ways to impact the game. You know, not a lot of points, a lot of assists, and he's finding ways to work with that discomfort. Anthony Davis, you have to do that. You have to like look Draymond Green in the eye and say, I don't care how great of a defender you are. Meet me in the post, and I'm going to score all the points and carry this team. And there was really no way the Lakers were going to win this game tonight. But at least you can go down and, you know, swinging with 30 points and say that I'm still going to score, and at least put some fear in this team when you're going back to Los Angeles. Now they feel like, you know, they know that even if you score 40 in game 3, what are you going to do in game 4?
Yeah, I mean, that's the difference between a perimeter player or a wing player and a post player. And I don't know in the history of basketball that I can think of a post player that has been that type of player where you're like, hey, just give me the ball anywhere on the floor. I'm going to take it in my own hands and score. And especially in the modern NBA where like we just do away with post possessions because they're inefficient unless LeBron James is in the post. So, like, it's hard. I think in AD's defense, if Draymond, and he shouldn't let himself get pushed way out to the elbow or pushed way out to the three-point line. But if that's where he's getting his catches, it's hard for him to run around like Steph Curry and create defensive conflicts to create open passes. So, I don't know. I think Draymond should be more aggressive and should get in the paint, but I don't know. Anyway, it seems like Alabaster. I'm tired.
Hey.
Leave me alone. Alabaster has the interjection. What you got?
It's not even 2 in the morning yet. Come on.
I would like to say that centers have won the last 5 MVPs, so post players still do have some value.
It's not
in the
that
NBA.
you love to take my words and make me feel like I'm wrong. So you're calling Giannis a center, and also like the point that I'm making is that's what we're accustomed to seeing wing players do. Like, give me the ball, get out the way. It's not something that we see all the time where we're like, hey, just give this guy the ball and get out the way. That's not how modern basketball is played. It's just not.
I don't. But look, we would not see this stat line. Giannis, Embiid, Jokic are not giving us this stat line after a 40-point game if Draymond is on them. That's just not going to happen. And they're not going to show that sort of malaise. And they're going to do exactly what I said. They're going to look at him and say, stop me from scoring. And there's no level of discomfort that's going to make them not want to do that. They're bigger than this guy. We're talking about the fundamentals in the NBA. You're bigger than the other guy, and you go and score, or at least you put up 35. You put up 30 shots or something.
Maybe the defense that I'm putting up is unnecessary and wrong. But like, we don't play in the post traditionally in the NBA. So now all of a sudden they're like, hey, pull out those post moves that we told you never to use anymore. Hey, who cares about entry passing? Like, it's not your ball. We're gonna find some way to get you the ball, and you have to take over the game without having the ball in your hands until the last second. And while the regular season MVPs have been big men, I don't remember all the recent finals MVPs, but my guess is, I know last year was Steph Curry. My guess is the finals MVP and playoff performers that we care about are perimeter players. And I'm including Giannis in that conversation because he catches the ball on the perimeter quite a bit and drives. He doesn't set up with his back to the basket the way that we're expecting AD to dominate a smaller player in the post. It's just not something that we see. I'm not saying that we shouldn't do it more often, but we don't see it. And it's weird that out of nowhere, we're like, hey, be Patrick Ewing.
Well, no, at the elbow, at the elbow, right at the free throw line.
And Jokic doesn't dominate from the elbow in that way. Like, he's not dominating people because they're smaller than him. I guess because he can see over them and pass. But like, Jokic dominates from the elbow because he can pass and because he shoots the same jump shot that AD is shooting. And we're looking at him like, hey, don't shoot that. You got a little man on you.
Alabaster agree with me, so clearly I'm right. So
now Alabaster just knows how to push my buttons to make good good TV, I guess, is what we're doing.
Alabaster?
Yeah.
Anything else on the game? That's it? Nothing
No,
else on
I got-
how the
I've-
series
I've-
is going to go?
I have tons of thoughts on the game. I think the Warriors are going to win the series. I mean, after game 1, I didn't feel too concerned about how they were going to look against the Lakers. I mean, that fourth quarter sort of told me a lot. Once they got a little rest, they looked better. The Lakers, my concern with the Lakers this entire time was the fact that once you have more intricate offensive sets against you, that how are they going to adapt? They look fantastic against Memphis Grizzlies team who couldn't shoot, who ran nothing, who just tried to throw the ball at the rim and see what happens. But when they were getting murdered by simple Draymond, Steph Curry, pick and roll, and Draymond, leaking to the basket, that they were trying to blitz and double team Steph Curry, and they carved them up the entire time. That Lakers defense, once the Warriors figure you out and you have to adapt, that's the second level of of a defense that makes a defense great. And I have not really, seen that from the Lakers in terms of the type of competition that they have faced to be able to do that. AD is going to be in the paint. He's going to be blocking as many shots as possible. But when the Warriors start zipping and running, what are you going to do to actually defend that? And I don't think the Lakers got it.
And Clay was good. Clay was hitting shots. That helps. Wiggins was better than he's been. That helps a lot. When you're going to trap Steph or try to force the ball out of his hands, you force it to someone else. It's nice when those someone else's are Clay that can hit shots and Wiggins that is going to attack the basket and hit shots. This was not a game. I think the Lakers still feel good. They got the split, which is normally what you want when you're starting a series on the road. However, in that split, we also learned or were reminded that the Warriors are just better. They're better. It doesn't mean the Lakers can't win, but they're going to need more out of LeBron. They're going to need Vanderbilt not to shoot because, he was throwing things at the backboard. And they're going to need Austin Reeves to be the Austin Reeves that we thought, that I'm him, Austin Reeves. We need that out of you at this point if you're going to make this into a series.
Say it.
I'm not going to say it. I don't got nothing to say. I just
said
that if you him, we need him. And
I'm just saying, you're not gonna call him Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. You're not gonna see Kareem. You're not gonna see Kareem was gonna show up at the crypto.
Well, he ain't Cream right now.
Cream.
He's not. He ain't Cream right now. He was Cream last round. Right now, he's Austin Reeves. So I'm gonna need Kareem Abdul-Jabbar to return. All right, Alabasta, give me my check. We earned it. I appreciate that. Anything else? Now we moving on. Transition. Is it time for the transition? I think so. Well, anyway, appreciate you for staying up with me, David Dennis Jr. We are going to time travel and replace you with the great Mina Kimes.
We look so much alike anyway. So
I had to tell the people because otherwise they'd be confused.
I know when I had my pandemic hair, it looked like Mina. So I got you.
As promised, here is the great Mina Kimes. Don't ask why I seem so much more awake and full of energy, and maybe my shirt's a different color. It's just the magic of television. Hey, Mina.
Of me being here, maybe?
Yeah,
Hi.
That's it. It just brought a smile to my face and energy to my shirt.
Well, I appreciate it nonetheless.
Alabaster.
All right, let's talk about some hoops before we pivot to football. All right, in the Eastern Conference, who should feel better as the series heads to Philly? The Sixers or the Celtics?
Well, Joe Mazzulla is feeling pretty good right now. He's feeling salty after everyone told him he can't coach. But hey, what about those in-game adjustments, folks? I enjoyed that. But yeah, I don't know. What do you want me to say? I've been pretending all playoffs long like I know what's happening in the NBA. And anyone else who's talking about what they know what's happening in the NBA, they're all pretending to. We've all been confused by this year's playoffs. So I'm going to go ahead and say Philly. They're going to give the MVP title to Embiid. They're going to be fired up. They got the split, which is what everyone says that they want when they start their series on the road. I think Philly should feel really good about their positioning, despite the fact that the Celtics are just better.
Well, I think you hit on why this is such a hard series to get. This particular series is so hard to get your arms around it because the Celtics are better. They're the better basketball team. On paper, look at the regular season. If you look at the matchups, all of it, consider the fact, of course, that Embiid is still a little bit banged up. They should win. However, and it's not just Mazzulla, although he certainly deserves his fair share of criticism after game one. They just lay stinkers. I hate when analysts give answers that are they didn't want it enough or they didn't play hard enough on defense, but it's all true. Literally, that is there's some strategic stuff for sure, but when Boston lays the aforementioned stinkers, it's often because they don't play with a killer instinct at the end of games, or they're not aggressive enough on defense, or they let their guard down, or they make boneheaded errors and turn over the basketball, which makes our jobs more difficult because I have no idea on any given day which version of the Boston Celtics we're going to get.
Yeah, the Celtics defense is the big concern because I think you could look at offensive play and say we just weren't hitting shots, or the sets that we were running, they knew all our sets. There are reasons to explain away offense that aren't effort. Guys seem to try hard on that end of the floor. But defense, when you have the pieces, which they have, particularly perfectly matched for that version of the 76ers, when they got wing defender after top tier wing defender, everyone's switchable, and they still let James Harden go off on him. It's hard to have confidence in a team like that can have mental lapses in moments like that. I don't know. I could understand mid-season you're playing a bad team, maybe have a momentary lapse. In the playoffs, the first game of the second round at home against a rival, a team that you play in the playoffs enough that you should have some animosity towards them, you just get whooped. It's unexplainable. But then they come back the next game and all of a sudden they're motivated. So I think it speaks to the coach. It speaks to the team. The leadership is all the things that I get mad at analysts. Well, not analysts. It's mostly just regular people on the street. Their armchair analysis is they didn't want it enough. They weren't playing that hard. And then I watch the games like, damn, come on, guys.
Want it a little harder. I mean, to their credit, and I think when we think about what's going to happen moving forward, they did figure out some stuff between games 1 and 2. Turns out Jaylen Brown on James Harden makes a lot of sense. Turns out more Grant Williams, very good for this matchup. Clearly, if you're playing Joel Embiid, you want to take a lot of threes, which they did. I think the Sixers could probably hope that they won't be as successful from 3 in the next game and that they'll get a better version of Embiid as he gets healthier. But, I would say unless those things happen, I do lean Boston because, again, on a pure roster versus roster basis, if they're actually trying and they're well coached, they are the better basketball team.
Yeah, roster versus roster, playoff experience. They've gone deep, it feels like, just about every year that they had Tatum. They were in a championship last year. You would think that it feels a little bit like the Bucks in that, hey, but you were one of the teams that we knew were comfortable here, that we knew would be okay in these situations. And for whatever reason, they haven't been up until this point. But going against the 76ers, which is a team that has a couple of players, at least their 2 best players, are not players that have had deep runs in the playoffs or have a history of clutch playoff performances. So I think you're right to lean Celtics based on what we've known of them so far, but we don't know anything about anybody this year. I don't know. Luckily, I don't have to bet on these games to support my family because I would be broke.
Who do you think is the best team left in the playoffs?
I want to say the Nuggets, but also the Nuggets have played 2 pretty incomplete teams so far. As much as we wanted to make the Suns a thing, the Suns struggled against the Clippers, who didn't have either of their big 2. The Suns bench is atrocious. It's hard for me to knock the Nuggets because they've been really good in the regular season and in the postseason, but it's also hard for me to be like, hey, you guys are awesome, because who have they really played yet? I know we thought the Suns were going to be, but the Suns haven't been that.
But who is good? Who are they going to play?
Exactly.
That's such a great challenge. I think that's the issue
fair.
with this postseason.
That is fair.
Yeah, I also would go with the Nuggets, and I think if this plays out the way we've just been discussing, the Nuggets beat the Suns, which seems fairly likely, and let's say Boston pulls this off and Philly gets bounced. Are we going to revisit the MVP discourse? How much pressure is there? I mean, the logical thing to do is to say, hey, in the same way that we were wrong to pin the Nuggets playoff struggles on Jokic at all, or to attribute or I say that any of that should tarnish his previous MVPs, we would also be wrong to do it for Embiid.
Exactly.
Let's be, circumspect and take the correct vantage point on all of this, but something tells me that we won't do that, and we'll just get a bunch of segments with people saying it should have been Jokic. Embiid's a joker.
We gotta fill this time somehow, Mina. But yeah, I mean, you can explain away Embiid's struggles.
Yeah,
it's like with injury and rosters not quite matching up. And the same thing. Yeah, the same thing with Jokic's struggles. Yeah, that's fair. Same thing with Jokic's struggles in the playoffs in previous seasons is his roster wasn't up to par. So I don't know. It's a regular season award. I think it's fair that Embiid got it for this regular season, and maybe Jokic will get the Finals MVP, which I think everybody would want more anyway.
Nobody remembers the Finals MVP.
I mean, the point is he'd rather win a championship.
Yeah.
Steph wanted a Finals MVP.
I can't even. I don't know. Get into naming the last 5 Finals MVPs.
Yeah, I can't. I have no idea. I mean, if I could name the last Finals winners, I could name the last Finals MVPs. Yeah.
It's either Steph or Giannis. He's always a safe guess.
Steph's replacing LeBron on Mount Rushmore basketball. You heard that awful take that Stephen A was floating?
I love the arbitrary distinction of a Mount Rushmore, because 5 is too much, but if we get it down to 4 is when the debates get really, really tricky.
Oh gosh! All right, Alabaster, take us to something that we can predict a lot better than the NBA playoffs.
Sorry.
Okay, we're gonna move to football. Although I could name the last Finals MVPs, 5 Finals MVPs, but I digress. The NFL draft just happened, and that's interesting because it doesn't seem like a lot of guys who were drafted a few years ago are getting extended. So my question to you all: are NFL teams getting worse at drafting?
I mean, sure, or getting worse, getting better. I don't know. I think understanding the way to draft is a constantly evolving process. They're like, because if you're looking for an advantage, you can't do what everyone else is doing. But also, if you're doing what everyone else is doing, then you're probably not going to get mocked. And there are a lot of people, not mock draft, but like made fun of. And there are a lot of people getting mocked right now. And I'm on the mocking side of these, or not people, but teams, because they're making foolish picks. But I guess if they're going to end up with a high percentage of these players becoming, I guess, busts, or at least not getting the 5th-year option or getting extensions, then taking a risk at the positions that some of these teams are taking risks at, I guess you can argue that that makes a little sense. And maybe if you get a guy who fits your system and frankly, I'm talking about the Lions. The Lions stress me out. They really stress me out. I was saying a lot of words. The Lions and the Falcons is what we're talking about here, right?
Yeah, I mean, well, they're actually. I'd argue we're also talking about the Texans, and here's why. So the reason Alabaster brought up the lack of success that teams have had in drafting comes off of the recent revelation that from the 2020 draft class, only 12 of, I assume 32, unless somebody lost a pick, 32 5th-year options, meaning, for those who don't know, your first round, one of the benefits of drafting a guy in the first round is before you even franchise tag him, there's also this thing called the 5th-year option, which is based on where he's drafted. So it's kind of like a franchise tag. It's another reason why things are heavily stacked against players and getting paid. It's a set salary. So, and it's a lot of money for, it basically saying that this first round pick was really good and we're happy to lock him in at, like, I don't know, $15 million or whatever. So that number 12 is the lowest number of 5th-year options that have been picked up since it was created in 2011 with that CBA. So the implication is like, wow, these teams really had a bad draft because they didn't find guys that they wanted to, suppress their salaries and keep them on their teams. You could say, well, maybe this is an aberration. Maybe it was a bad draft. I don't have the class in front of me, but it's a lot of bad picks, right? Maybe that was just a one-off thing. We'll see what happens next year. But I think what it illustrates, Domonique, is when it comes to the draft, we only know 2 things. And this is what brings us to the teams that we've been criticizing. We know that positional value matters because that's regardless of, it's a crapshoot, sure. But we know that if you do succeed at this position, you can save a lot of money if you find a quarterback or an edge rusher or whatever relative to a running back or a linebacker, which is what the Lions took. That's real, no matter what. So you already have an advantage if you take one of those positions, if it works out. And then the other thing we know is that it's good to have a lot of draft picks because teams, it is a crapshoot. And yes, people get mad. It feels like we always just praise trading down, and it's like, come on, like, it's not always good to trade down. Well, it kind of freaking is, frankly, because the one thing we know about the draft is that we don't know a lot about the draft, and it's better to have a lot of shots on goal. And that's why when we talked about it on my podcast this week, I picked the Arizona Cardinals as one of the biggest winners of the draft.
It's ego is what it comes down to, and nobody gets into the draft to move down and draft players whose names we don't know. You get into the draft, or you get into like talent evaluation, you get into front office work to work your way up to the GM so that you can make the call to draft the guy as with the big name to be the future Hall of Famer. And you think you have a big staff, you spend a lot of time watching film and evaluating them mentally, evaluating them physically, looking at their injury reports. You do all that so that you can think or believe that somehow you know better than everyone else. And the fact of the matter is, you don't. In part because you can't evaluate better than, like, the argument or the idea is that you have a better eye than everyone else. No, someone has a better eye than you. And then there's a whole bunch of other variables that go into whether someone succeeds or fails. And so the more shots you have, the better off you're going to be. And of course, every now and then there are these singular guys where you can't miss, but some of those guys miss too. I did want to talk about the fifth-year option a little bit because it was originated in the CBA that I was a part of negotiating, but that was a big fight about bringing down the cost of first-round picks because they were committing to guys who were busts, big amount of money.
Sam Bradford.
Yeah, there was a lot of guys like that. And sadly for Cam Newton, it happened just before his draft, but they were committing a whole lot of money to these players, which was also, since it's a cap sport, taking money out of the salary cap, going to other veteran players. So shorten the contracts, shrink the contracts. We got it down to 5 years, and we're able to negotiate for the fifth year to be an option with a major boost, which it's still suppressive on the players' wages, but it's working the way it's supposed to work because it forces players into free agency or it forces teams to make a commitment.
It's also suppressive on stars, which I think sometimes when we talk about contracts and CBAs and who got screwed, we're always just like, well, like it's the first round draft pick should have been able to. Yeah, he should make more, but the money that the team saved by not paying him is supposed to be going to veterans and middle-class NFL players. Right. That was the purpose of this. The salary cap is a zero-sum game, and I think people tend to forget that because it just isn't as like, you know, when you think about we look at the tags and we look at the option, we don't consider the total pool being. Am I being boring?
Probably, but I love it.
It's boring. That's why it's not as fun as saying the union sucks. It's so bad. But yeah, it's ego. I saw a quote from Brad Holmes. I'm gonna actually read it because I think it's really interesting because you and I talked about the Lions draft quite a bit. And
on your podcast, the Mina Kimes show,
featuring Lenny. Check it out. Okay.
And Lamar.
He said, you got to battle the whole thing of people having minimal information versus people having all the information, which is us. And it's tough for the fans because they have to go off of the information they see, people putting together these mock drafts. Well, we've been grinding it for the past 9 months. When you put cognitive strain in a project, i.e. mock drafts or forecasts, when the desired result isn't what you want, your brain's not going to like it, It literally is very long. It's a very long way of saying we didn't care about positional value and we think we know more than you.
Yeah. That's it. It's
and you know what? The Seahawks were like this for 10 years, and they had 10 years of bad drafts. Yeah. Like after Russell Wilson, and then they and last year they took the guys that they took Charles Cross. Everybody thought they were going to take Charles. You know, like in the first round, and guess what? It worked out. It was a great draft pick. You know, it's just, like you don't know. Like you usually don't know more. The Seahawks, by the way, in this year's draft, traded out of the third round altogether with Denver, which I can't believe Denver's still doing trades with Seattle, by the way. And they got a fourth rounder and then a future third. And as a Seahawks fan, that's not fun. You want to watch your team pick in the third round, but that's insane value to get. It's basically like a fourth rounder for nothing for the delayed pain of waiting a year. And the reason that they're able to do it is because John Schneider's not going anywhere. And I think that's another thing we underestimate all of this, which is a lot of these GMs are just making decisions to save their jobs.
Moral hazard is and this can get us to the Houston Texans draft. And a lot of I guess the Lions, you could look at this also the same way, where the Lions clearly had what they believed to be holes on their roster that they wanted to fill with the best players they could possibly fill. These players are at low value positions and might have been there later. But if you're concerned about maximizing, I guess, the way that you look right now or maximizing your championship window, that might determine the decision that you make, which is moral hazard. And the ultimate culprit of moral hazard is the Houston Texans and the decision that they made to trade away a very valuable or several very valuable picks so that they could move up and draft Will Anderson after they already got the quarterback CJ Stroud. And even if Will Anderson turns out to be an incredible pass rusher, they still, you think about the opportunity cost. What they give up? They move in that
They
that
traded
draft
12, 33, and a future first.
and a future first from them who stink into a draft that is loaded next year, at least with big name quarterbacks. So the value is just absurd. But if you are concerned about your job security, getting these guys in right now could potentially help you.
It really is like that. It really is a reflection of whether front offices are thinking both short term and long term, or just short term. Shoot, I don't know if the Arizona Cardinals would have done that if Steve Keim was still the general manager. But they moved on. New guy comes in with a mandate. You got a long runway, and that's how you get great trades like the one that they just pulled off.
I don't know. I mean, the ego to make some of these decisions that are against the common knowledge is it's a lot. You're putting a lot on it working out and you seeming smart, because this is going to hang over all of these franchises that make these outlandish decisions. It's going to hang over them if they don't have success, and it's going to end up being the piece that's written in the local paper, if people still do that motivates them to get fired. They're like, remember when we could have had this guy? There's nothing more embarrassing than what the Bears were going through, where they're like, hey, you could have had
I'll tell you
Patrick
what, though,
Mahomes.
I think the Lions are going to win the division. I wouldn't be surprised if both Holmes and Campbell get big contract extensions because of it. So,
well played, my friend. Y'all won a Super Bowl. I want a new deal. I want to win a division for the first time in forever.
Yeah, that's the Lions. They don't want a Super Bowl. They just want to get into the playoffs, man. Atlanta, same way.
Yeah,
we're so
good
cranky.
for them.
Let's talk about Jordan Love.
That'll make us happy.
Yeah, speaking of Jordan Love, this sort of dovetails off of the contract conversation. What do you make of Jordan Love's extension with the Packers?
All right, you got the details of the extension,
because they're really relevant to this.
Yeah, because the fifth year, this is the fifth year option. Was 25? What was the fifth year option for Jordan Love? It was around 25 million. What it would have been?
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah. So he signed an extension that pretty much takes the fifth year option and spreads it across 2 seasons. It takes pressure off of the Packers financially, and it takes pressure off of him, I guess, is the argument, that it's taking pressure off of him to have to perform well enough this year. But this reminds me of the Daniel Jones situation, where if I'm Jordan Love, I might just say, give me this fifth year option and let me go play, and then we'll see what happens from there. But I mean, I get the rationale from both sides. I wouldn't have done it, but
so
I understand it.
Here's like a further breakdown from Field. His salary in 2023 has a $9 million signing bonus. It's $1 million, and there's escalators of up to $9 million. So basically this year he has escalators in which he could make as much as Baker Mayfield, basically, right? And then his 2024 salary is $5.5 million fully guaranteed. So it's, you add up the 5.5 and the $9 million. He really bet against himself, man, because
yeah.
I thought they were going to pick up, like, this is a franchise that said, we are moving on from Aaron Rodgers. We are
he had him.
Yes. Jordan Love is our quarterback. I would have been shocked if they didn't pick up his fifth year option. And once they didn't, to your point about Daniel Jones, yes, there was potential for Jordan Love to not make, about $10, $13 million or whatever. But there was also potential for him to make a ton of money, and he turned it down. Like, if Jordan Love played really well this year, he would have been in line for such a massive payday relative to this. Heck, if he played fine.
Yeah,
I
that's what I was gonna
like
say.
he would have
Didn't
made
have to-
more than this.
That's why I pointed to Daniel Jones.
Yeah.
Because Daniel Jones played fine, and he probably, if he would have played fine, he'd have had more negotiating leverage and more value in the marketplace than Daniel Jones. Because he would have said, I mean, y'all got like no film on me. This year I showed you potential. I can grow from this. Give me back the Brinks truck up, or at least hit me with the franchise tag, or I'm going somewhere else. So it was definitely a bet against himself, but the way that I would assume the rationale he has is that this expands his time. There won't be as much pressure. Maybe he's concerned about betting against himself, and this puts him in a situation where and their salary cap is still kind of tied up in paying Aaron Rodgers. So maybe that's the argument for it, is like to give them more relief on the salary cap, to give me more time, to give them more time to build a roster around me. I'm with you though. Like I would have took that big check and we'd have figured it out from there. Even if he had a bad year this year, he would have had value. Like you just mentioned, Baker Mayfield out here still getting jobs. You could have got this deal next year, but
I wonder if he feels like indebted to the organization because not only was it a crazy draft pick in the first place, but then the fact that they ultimately did move on. I don't know. My big takeaway is that Brian Gutekunst is very good at his job. I think he's one of the best GMs in the NFL because this is an extraordinarily team-friendly deal. Like they could be getting such a bargain, and they've limited their risk so much by doing this.
And he's repeatedly built really good rosters around Aaron Rodgers. It's not like he was failing Aaron Rodgers as much as we like to tell that story of the first-round quarterback and first-round receivers. They have had loaded defenses and good offensive lines. They haven't had ultimate success, but it doesn't feel like it's on Lil Goody.
Just to spin it to the football, like obviously we don't know what Jordan Love's going to look like. We've barely seen him play. Year one didn't look great. Year two comes in relief in the Philadelphia game. Looks awesome for, like 13 passes or whatever he threw. We infer that he can't be that bad if they're willing to actually make this move. And so there's something they're seeing internally. But I also think he's in a really good position. I mean, look at this. I understand that, the Packers fulfilled their annual commitment of not taking a pass catcher in the first round, but it's still a very good offensive line, a very good run game. I think that the tight ends they got are going to be extremely useful. I think Watson and Dobbs could take a big leap. There's a lot of potential for Jordan Love to look pretty good this year.
Yep, which is why he shouldn't have signed this deal. But I mean, I guess maybe this is the long-term play for him, as he's at a place, at an organization that he thinks, with a general manager that he thinks can build a good team around him. And what gives him the best chance to succeed and gives them the best chance to succeed long-term is making this. It's a hell of a bet on the organization. And it's a lot of trust that you put in an organization. And my time in players' unions, my time in life suggests that you should not trust the organization. But hey, Jordan Love, this might be the exception. We get a check so we can go watch these games that have already happened but we haven't watched yet. But
I don't know where you are in your space-time continuum.
We're taping after the game tonight.
This is your different timelines, that the way you do this show are very, it's a multiverse theory. I don't really get it.
We are the multiverse.